That's
Albanian.
that's good enough.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you for sure.
And you heard or on the news today, a Russian airliner.
This program is made possible in part by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bales Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to Consider This here on the UNO campus. What has become a tradition through the University of Nebraska at Omaha has just happened this week by the time you see this show. We were lucky enough to once again host the annual Third World Conference held and sponsored by a very prominent department within the university. My guests today is the Dean of International Studies and Programs at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. He is also the Director for the Center of Afghanistan Studies. He's been interviewed more times recently than anyone around here can count, certainly because of the changing world events. Tom Gutierrez, welcome once again to the show.
It's good to be with you again, Carol.
And we also have the honor this week of having with us Fatos Tarifa. He is currently Ambassador of the Republic of Albania to the United States, and he is the featured keynote speaker at the Third World Conference, and we are very glad to have you both here. The reason I asked you is because there are still, and I don't know, even after all the times I've talked to you, Tom, that I have the concept of third world country, emerging nation, emerging democracy, emerging anything, and although they're all different, how this has really changed the international scene. Certainly Afghanistan is the case in point right now. Is there a definition? They didn't have when I was in high school.
Yeah, right. Well, when you were in high school, they didn't have third world countries, I think, Carol.
Not as such. It was a little different.
You,
they had countries.
I think in terms of definitions, that we be talking about here, you know, they're always changing in a sense, and so are the statuses of all countries. And you know, we lost the whole second world when the communist world kind of essentially came to an end. People might say, well, Cuba and North Korea remain, and China perhaps in the second world. But these were nations that weren't a part of either the first world associated with NATO and the Western Alliance, and those that were not in the Warsaw Pact. And so many of the non-aligned countries, and then it also includes definitions relating to how a nation's economy is going, how its political development is going, how upwardly mobile are its citizens. But I think, you know, Ambassador Tarifa, who has Tarifa, actually, I always want to use the Arabic pronunciation. That's right.
Syllable.
But Ambassador Tarifa, you know, as a political scientist and socialist, he might have an interesting definition relating to third world as well.
I don't have a definition actually, but I would also bring to point the economic development aspect. So usually developing countries are considered to be part of the third world. But yeah, Tom rightly said, it was a concept that was coined actually during the time when there was a Cold War and there was a first world in which, you know, the development country, industrial countries were part of, and the United States was actually the country that would be considered at the time the first world, and then all the Warsaw Treaty countries, the Soviet camp was a separate part of the world, and it's called usually a second world. Well, it has the political alliance connotation and also the economic development connotations.
Well, let me just ask you this. Some of the then second world countries, as you said, we've sort of lost a tier in some respects because those companies who were trying to redefine themselves economically, politically, things just were unstable. Your country, Albania, that was in the communist sphere, has certainly a very interesting history, but its recent history, it's declared and as an emerging democracy. Is that
Well, that's the
fair
term
enough?
they use today, emerging democracies. So all these formerly socialist ruled, communist ruled countries that opened up, started to liberalize their politics and economies after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and are now trying to build democratic institutions and making their path to Europe, and are usually called emerging democracies. There are a number of them in Eastern Europe and former Soviet Union, some more successful than others, but they're all actually democratic countries today.
But there are countries like Afghanistan which are not democracies. Does someone from a democratic nation such as yours that is struggling, economically and trying to sort of find its place in the sea of world, does it differentiate itself in the countries that you sort of think of yourself as from the Afghanistans and some of the other more, I don't have another proper word, totalitarian in a sense, countries?
Well, talking about the third world, again, coming back to the first question, people often associate the third world with geography as well. Latin American countries, African and Asian countries will be mostly countries that belong to the third world. We in the Balkans, although newly emerging democracies, would like to associate ourselves with Europe and with the old democracies in the European Union, actually, and also hoping to shortly join this union, which is a union of 15 democracies right now. So a number of countries in Central Europe and in the Balkans are trying hard to become members of the European Union in the short term, in 3 to 4 years, and the rest are struggling hard to also associate themselves with this union and dissociate themselves with the concept of a third world developing countries. We escape the risk of third orderization, I would say, or the risk of going south instead of going west, so we're trying to go west indeed.
Well, you certainly have been in a pretty active climate around there, and I'm not talking about the weather, but the Kosovo situation, Slobodan, just nearby you, and everything that was going on was part religious war, part just political, and no one could really define it adequately for me, and I suppose even for them over there. But you're not far from where there's still real political uncertainty, and yet you're pretty stable.
We're becoming stable, more and more stable, I think, and we're in that region when there has always been a problem, a powder keg, that is the term.
World War I, World War II?
World War II, but not World War III. I think there'll never be a World War III in Europe. But yeah, that's right, it's a very troubled region still, but I'm inclined to see it in a positive light, and that because things are changing positively in all these countries. It is the first time in the Balkans that we have a democratically elected government in every single country, including Bosnia and Serbia.
Well, how does that make you feel? And what impact does it have for a region and then hopefully a larger region and a larger region? How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel good. I
feel bad.
Well, becoming part of a civilized world, a democratic world, and it is the world that we belong to. We have gone through a very long history, but in a short time we have made big progress, and including political reform, economic reform, and Albania has joined the other nations that actually not only aspire but are striving to build a real democracy and a rule of law. And good signs are enlightening, you can see them.
So what does it mean when countries like Albania are making strides? And I don't want to do it in a sort of jingoistic, so they're like us, or Europe, and then we come from the European tradition, or they're like the United States, because there's a lot of talk about, well, they're choosing the right path, they're democratic, and they're going to become capitalistic, and there's a lot of carefulness in how we describe what really progress is in a nation.
I think that it's also very important, as Ambassador Tarifa mentioned, that we have a number of criteria that people look at when they see a country kind of going into the first world or the West or whatever it is, as he suggests. And first of all, the fact that the citizens are able to participate and choose their own form of government. It's a very, very important thing. But also that the economy is permitting upward mobility. This is exceedingly important for all of the citizens because it helps to engender a sense of national identity that that people have a sense of belonging and want to invest themselves into the future of their own country. And when there's educational opportunities, he was talking earlier today at a Rotary meeting and telling us all that Albania has 100% literacy. You know, there are a lot of first world countries of long standing, including our own, in which there's not 100% literacy. So it's always a kind of dicey thing, and I think that many of these countries of the former Second World that were attached to you know, one alliance in the Second World with the Soviet Union or with China, and Albania at different times in its history had connections with both. But there are a lot of them that have been emerging into the West, and I think, as the ambassador has suggested, the very important part of all this is going to be the application to the European Union, because there are certain kinds of things that will imply, and the most important, I think, is that it will be, as a nation, able to deal with the Europeans, other European countries, economically, politically, and even militarily on equal footing. It doesn't mean that everybody has to have the same amount of everything, but it will be of equal footing, and that the citizens will be able to go back and forth between all of their countries and engage in commerce and maybe even live for a period of time in other countries while they're doing this. And I think that you see countries like the Czech Republic, Slovenia, Hungary, Poland making rapid strides, and from everything that Ambassador Tarifa has been telling us, that's what's been going on now in Albania, more stable than a lot of the others who have been struggling during the breakup of former Yugoslavia.
All right, so we have countries that, like you and others in the region, have made great strides to be what you see as being part of what you originally were, which is sort of that European area. What did the really unstable countries, I mean, how can you as a country relate to them when there's this instability in places around you? And that obviously is the area that is a little frightening to all of us. Not that they're all terrorists, I'm not putting in those wings, but that instability is a concern to everybody, or should be?
Sure it should be, because it has an impact on all of us, you know, just like the instability in Afghanistan today and in Pakistan, you know, is having an impact on all of us, because we have terrorists who are seeking refuge there, if nothing else.
Well, that's true. You know, you saw how an unstable Balkans destabilized Europe, actually, and that's why the European Union, NATO, and the United States had to go the way they went, you know, to oust Milosevic. The good news, though, is that there is more stability today in the Balkans than it was 10 years ago. So let's see the picture from that, you know, positive view. There is much better today in every single country, including, again, Bosnia and Kosovo, than it used to be. You don't have atrocities. You don't have states fighting against states anymore. You have more stability, even in Macedonia, despite the recent conflict there between the two ethnic groups. So things are improving, and the Balkans, instead of, again, detaching themselves from Europe, are coming closer to Europe, and this is what is believed to be the truth.
And I think the key to a lot of this is that the youth of these countries don't remember the periods that are, you know, the most defining parts of our you know, recent knowledge of that part of the world. And they just have always been in a situation, you know, those who are 18 or even 20, they can't remember the period when Albania was a communist nation. And, you know, it's interesting to talk to people in my class when you're talking to them about the Persian Gulf War. If I have students who are 19, 20 years old, you know, they've heard of the Persian Gulf War, but they don't remember the Persian Gulf War. And you know, there are a lot of things like that for the youth around the world. They don't remember the Berlin Wall, but they've heard of the Berlin Wall.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Churchill said once, you know, that the Balkans is burdened with more history than they can handle. But the good news today is that the young generation and people who have now felt the wind of democracy really have chosen to forget their historical memories and not rely on them to solve past accounts.
Are there any memories, in a sense, that those young people should be remembering? Any lessons that are still applicable, even though the rules are kind of changing and the alignments are kind of changing? Are there any lessons that you fear that they may not learn and should remember?
Well, history is very alive there. And of course, you cannot get rid of your historical memory as a nation. But history should be viewed in a emancipatory way, so to learn from past mistakes in order not to repeat them again. And I think all nations of the Balkans are looking forward, not backward. So the future is pulling them forward, be it in Slovenia or Croatia or Serbia, everywhere. And this is the future.
Do the people in, well, we look at Afghanistan right now, and there's a lot of focus, almost like a laser beam on there, and it's under a microscope, and that I wonder if the people in this country, or maybe your country, or any other country, get wrong ideas about if you don't want to be a democracy, if you do want to have a theocracy or whatever they are over there. I don't really know what the right term is.
They're in a mess.
They're in a mess.
Yeah, right.
Do countries have, short of wreaking terrorism on other countries, do countries have a right to do that? Even if they're unstable, they've got refugees in and out, do they have the right to do that?
Well, right, I guess might makes right in so many of these situations, which is the unfortunate thing, but I don't think they do have either the moral or the political right to do that. Unfortunately, they're in a position oftentimes to be able to intimidate the population to permitting them to do that. That's what happened in Serbia with Slobodan Milosevic, and that's what's happened in Afghanistan, where the Taliban are making of the country a kind of religious concentration camp with the aid of Al-Qaeda, the movement that Osama bin Laden is at the center of, and the Pakistani military. So this is not a government, the Taliban, that has been brought to power by the will of the people. Afghans haven't had a chance to vote for their government since 1973, and they've had 23 straight years of fighting. And they've had 4 years of drought, and their situation is horrible. And people like the Taliban don't have the right to inflict that upon the citizenry. They don't have the right to make it impossible for women, girls to go to school. That I don't care what their religion may preach. It's just not correct. That's a perversion of religion if they believe that their religion suggests that women shouldn't go to school.
So, at least things are calming down around where you're part of the world. If you were in Pakistan right now, or even Iran or Iraq, that whole area around there, I mean, they've got to be very worried about, not just from what we hear, obviously Pakistan is worried about a political upheaval, but the whole area is really a potential powder keg, is it not? Not just Pakistan because it's next door.
But I think Afghanistan helps to destabilize the region because it hasn't had any stability for such a long period, since 1973, literally. And I think other nations should be concerned about what's happening like that. And I think I think Pakistan right now is deciding to do what it is doing, coming back in a sense to the West and working with the United States against terrorism, because the policy of theocratization of the country has failed, and they've wound up creating a Frankenstein monster in their own midst. And so they're being forced to do a 180-degree turn to go back to maybe trying to secularize, because Pakistan is a failing state at this moment, and it risks becoming a failed state very seriously.
Isn't it a fine line, though? Your country, religion-wise, isn't a vast majority of any one major religion, is it?
Well, it depends,
Depends how you're counting.
Who says what, how you count them, and who counts them.
The very religious are the ones that mark it down on the census.
The last time there was a census in which people were asked about their religious identity was 1929, so that was some 70 years ago. And at that time it resulted that in a population of 800,000 people, 60%, 65% were Muslim. Now we're talking about the year 2000, 2001, when there are 3.5 million, not 800,000. And of a very young population which was born and grew up under a regime that was socialist and in which religion was banned. So a large number of people grew up with no religion or no possibility to practice any religion. Most realistically, we could say that, well, half of the population is actually non-believer. They identify with no religion.
That's the atheist kind of communist
well, you
kind
could
of
say atheist,
spillover.
non-believer, but the rest then is equally divided among Muslim, Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox.
So you don't, your immediate, there's no major religious movement that is trying to take religion totally into the political world and control the government as well. So you've seen that around you at times.
Right, but not in Albania. It has never been a religious movement in the country. And this is also historical roots. The Orthodox and the Muslims came actually with different invaders to Albania, a country that was originally Christian. So religion has never played the role it played in other Balkan nations to fight the enemy, which was the Ottoman Empire,
right,
which belonged to the Islamic world. So Orthodox religion served as a banner in the struggle for independence for all of the Balkan nations, not for Albania.
So there's not that deep, even though you don't feel like you're a strong Muslim or you don't feel like you're a strong Roman Catholic, but there's not that historical sort of...
No divide, there is tolerance, a lot of tolerance among people.
Well, that's...
So it doesn't matter politically, at least, you don't have religious parties in Albania. In the Balkans it is, but still religion has never been a strong factor in the Balkans, in my view.
Well, what do you think is the future of this, and I don't want this to be an anti-Islam thing, although that seems to be the predominant religion that has the clout to in Europe and Southeast Asia to move into the political arena. But it could be any religion in any given time. How do people make strong statements about that without appearing to be bashing people's religion? Because they feel very strong. This is a huge thing to them. I don't think we really understand. Even though some of them might be just politicians hiding in robes.
Well, people are able to intimidate others with religion, and Islam right now is the world's fastest growing religion. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody in a particular situation is going to be influenced by somebody else who is espousing a kind of a sectarian form of government. And the major thing that I think helps to either preclude or not permit that kind of thing is for the citizens not to feel divorced from their state, not to feel destitute, and so that they want to feel a kind of nationalism and not a kind of political connection that goes beyond its own borders. And you see a lot of these kind of pan-Islamic things. But when we're talking about what we're seeing today with Osama bin Laden and others, I think we're really talking about religious perversion. I don't think this is Islam at all. I don't believe that there's anything in Islam that suggests that you can commit suicide or kill innocent people for your objectives.
And I think they've made an effort, at least in this country, to put that idea
right.
forth.
It's like James Jones in Guyana. They weren't Christian, and these guys aren't Muslim.
True, yeah. Terrorism has no religion, and no country indeed. So it's international.
Well, through history, there have been terrorists who've used religion or the guise of religion to do that had really a political agenda as well as a religious one. So that's not new to us. But where does deprivation of a country fit into this equation? Poverty, maybe a religious bent, a strong political agenda, and their people are very poor. They have to make somebody look to be the bad guy, whether it's the United States or the neighboring country. They got more than their share of resources from whoever put this planet together. I mean, if you had to make an equation, or a recipe, you put so much of this in and so much, what's the most dangerous equation?
People living in extreme circumstances usually resort to extreme means to try and resolve them because they are feeling so destitute or disaffected from their own nation. So it's important for nations to incorporate every citizen to the degree that they can into the political process so that they at least feel, if they don't have what they want to have, that they can have some say in how in the future their families and their progeny might have something to be able to look forward to. And there are a lot of people, unfortunately, in many of the countries today from whence Osama bin Laden is able to recruit his partisans, where people don't feel connected to their own country. They feel disaffected, and they're susceptible.
What role does, and you're in a lot a different position. What role do countries like the United States in foreign aid, I don't mean in a patronizing, condescending way, here, take our money and do what we want, but does genuine foreign aid and foreign financial help, where does this all play in this?
Well, foreign aid, it helps, it aids, but it doesn't take you long. You have to create conditions, political, economic, and social conditions in each country in order to develop. So it should be help for self-help, not babysitting these societies for long.
But many United States citizens have bad taste in their mouths from foreign aid. I think many people see the need for foreign aid, but they have seen corrupt governments and sort of mafioso of different governments take that aid, never help the people. And I worry about with the economy being what it is here.
That's our problem. That's our fault. We need to make sure that if we're going to give aid, we better know to where it is going, to whom it will be, accorded. And if we haven't searched the situation, researched the situation out, well enough, then that's our fault.
Well, we haven't.
Well, we haven't oftentimes.
Or we had to deal with a certain people which we would have not
So
wanted to.
it's their fault as well, not just your fault.
Yeah.
That aid can be misused and mismanaged.
Well,
And,
Ambassador, I'm sorry.
Corrupt governments do that all the time.
Ambassador, if you were leaving Omaha and hoping that you had instilled one message at the conference, the Third World Conference here, or just to the people of Omaha as a part of the United States, what would it be?
Well, the message would be a friendly one. I represent a small country. It is no similar with America, either in size or people or history.
About the size of Maryland.
With the size of Maryland, you know that, right? And there is a very friendly nation there, which has a very strong human bond with the American nation as well, because it has contributed to the formation of the American nation, and it still does, with many immigrants that come from Albania and from the region around it. And that we need to strengthen ties, and in current days, also strengthen this alliance, international alliance, to fight the common enemy, terrorism. This is the big issue today, and we are on the side of the Americans supporting it.
Your country has voted on it, but it's just as important to a small country as it is to a large nation like
Well, it
ours.
is. America is a model of democracy. It's not a country that protects us. It's also a country that tells us how you can become a prosperous country, a democratic one, and we follow that path, not mistaking so.
Well, I hope you enjoyed your stay. Tom came and he stayed for 20-some years, so, but not from Albania. I want to thank you both for being with us today. We never solve any problems here, but we give people a little bit of food for thought. Tom Gutierrez, of course, is Dean of International Studies and Programs at UNO and Director of the Center for Afghanistan Studies. And our fine guest here today, Fatos Tarifa, double doctorate, I forgot to mention, PhD twice. He is Ambassador of Albania to the United States. Thank you so much for joining us, and good luck to you and your country. We want to remind you that you can see this show on the web, UNOTV at unomaha.edu. Please take advantage of that streaming video, and we'll see you next week.
This program is made possible in part by Nebraskans for Public Television.